Okay. Good evening. Rabbi Jacobson here. To all of you, ladies and gentlemen, especially including cyberspace. And the topic tonight is how deeply affected are we by our friends? As you can see, I'm proud of myself for titling the class that way. The reason is because I think a friend is a very underestimated the value and the power that it has in our lives. You know, a lot is talked about love in the romantic sense, relationships, spouses. Even though love obviously remains an elusive force in our lives, but there's a lot written about it. More music, more songs, more poems, more books have been written about this topic than any other. And people, as we say, you can't live with him, you can't live without him, you can't live with her, you can't live without her. But when it comes to friends are more, in a way, even, I wouldn't say more complicated, but more underappreciated and less spoken about. So though, yes, there was a sitcom called Friends, I think it's still a very popular one. But nevertheless, the role of friends, remember, precedes any type of marital, romantic relationship, because we start making friends from our youngest of age. So there's a lot talked about as well, about our family dynamic, our parents, our siblings, parents and children, even our authorities and teachers. But a friend is something that is, as I said, not spoken about enough, if at all. On the other hand, it's one of the maybe easiest things you can do to change your life. You can't change your parents, you can't change your brothers and sisters, and often you can't change the person you love in the romantic sense. But friends are something you can't change. So I want to talk about that in a very personal way, a relevant way, and of course it's based on this week's chapter. I always like to begin with a theme that's relevant before I say it's the Parsha, because as soon as you hear Parsha, trust me, I know from my own stereotypes, right away I say, oh, another Dvar Torah type of thing. And you know, I always tell the story, Philip can remind us all of those good old days when the people coming to this class were, this goes back almost 30 years, is it? And we would sit up sometimes till 4 a.m., people without any day jobs, clearly, musicians, aspiring musicians. All musicians are aspiring musicians in a way, right? And they would share with me, the group, some of their acid trips, and I would share them some of my Hasidic trips. That was the exchange. And it was very interesting. What I liked about it was completely spontaneous, no formalities. It was just improvisation, and natural stuff came out. And I remember those years I tried different experiments, so to speak. I don't mean any substance ones. I mean human interaction. And I tried an experiment because the people were coming. If you remember, the Kenny and others were bringing, the musicians were bringing their friends, and there were skeptics and people who were cynical, writers. You can imagine thinking people whose whole religion to them was one big joke. And here I was there trying to say something. So I couldn't be overly serious, but I had to also say something that's serious. They didn't come to me for humor. I remember thinking at some point that there are people coming who completely stereotype religion and Judaism and God. And before I even open my mouth, I'm already at a disadvantage, because I may remind one person of an angry grandfather that schlepped him to synagogue Yom Kippur, or an irrelevant Hebrew school teacher. I think it was Kenny Vance that told me then that the only thing he remembers from, the only thing he learned in bar mitzvah lessons were how to shoot kosher spitballs. That was his thing. You know, he learned the Jewish way of shooting spitballs. Even hearing spitballs takes you back to, early years. And so I tried an experiment without using any language that in any way was loaded. I didn't use the word God. I didn't use the word Torah. Instead of God, I created my own word. Instead of God, I used the word the essence of reality. Or, what was it? For New Age audiences, I would use non-existential layers of undefined energy or something like that. So the essence. And instead of Torah, it was blueprint. And instead of mitzvahs, I used connections. They're all accurate translations, mind you, but I just didn't use any Hebrew words. And instead of Mashiach, Geula, and redemption, I used destination. So I was waxing eloquent about this, like journey into the essence of reality, the higher reality, and using these different connections that lead you to this destination, following this blueprint, And I remember someone came over to me after a few weeks, and everyone was really fascinated. They were like mesmerized by this. And they came over to me. One guy came over to me after a few weeks and said, "Tell me, are you talking about God?" So I said, "Yes, but don't spoil it for the others." And it really worked. And I learned then a major truth, that communication, we live in a generation of communication. Everyone's communications. We're all communicating, and we communicate, and in therapy they tell you break the silence, you got to speak, you can't hold it in. And some people just don't know when to stop speaking once they break the silence. And then we have communicating tools, and so on. Everything is communications. But there's also another downside to communication, which is, just like words connect us, words also separate us. So true silence, you won't know what's on my mind, but sometimes I may use a word that will cause you to go ballistic, because it's a word that conjures up some memory that your mother used to use every time she got angry. How am I to know that? Or vice versa. So words are loaded. The word God, let's be very honest, the word God is not neutral for no one on this earth. Not for believers, not for non-believers, not for atheists. Maybe shut if you don't mind, the hot water heater. Because when you say the word God, this three-letter word, what does it mean? You ask two people, they'll have two different opinions. I'm beyond the prerequisite supreme being, first cause, creator. What's God? What is God? So they're firm believers. They're people who are ready to die and kill others in the name of God. They're people who are ready to die and kill others in the name that there's no God. You have radical, fanatic atheists, fanatic agnostics, and so on. So God is a very, very loaded word. And the same thing, the word Judaism, and Torah, and mitzvahs, and all this. Mitzvahs, people to translate, commandments. Who wants to be commanded? But when someone says connections, everybody wants to be connected. And the real translation of mitzvah is connection, by the way. Much more than commandment. Commandment is almost the external expression. God wanted a connection with us, and we connect with the divine through a mitzvah. Technically, yes, that turns into a commandment that God says, do this, don't do that. But if you were to understand that if children were taught this as a connection, it's a whole different attitude. Because then it's like a freeing experience. And I can go on and on about all these stereotypes. So, that's why the critical challenge that I find in a class like this, there are many classes you can go to. I try to do what I was trained, which is to make it relevant. Relevant, relevant, relevant. That's the operative word. How is a short story like we read in this week's chapter about Korach, who mutineered, this wise man Korach, the shrewd man, cousin of Moses, mutineered against Moses, the man of God, him and all his men. Well, what's the relevance of the story to us today? So there are many, many lessons. The one I chose to discuss is the one about friends. Because when you read the story, the opening of it, it's very similar to last week's opening. And last week we spoke about mob mentality. The 10 scouts, there's no question that they reinforced each other. Crimes, and same thing with good things, are always stronger when you do it with a group. Because once there's a group, in the sense it gets rid of some of the guilt. Say everyone else is doing it, I'm only part of everybody else, I'm following orders, or whatever people come up with. So friends are a group. And they're a group that can turn things into great synergy, or it can turn things into disasters. So you have right here in the beginning of the chapter, Korach ben Yitzhar ben Korach ben Kohaz ben Levi, and his cohorts, Dosan Aviram, They all come together. Vayikach Korach. The word Vayikach means he took, but it also means he separated himself. He aligned himself with a whole group, and they came and challenged Moses as a group. Vayakumu lifnei Moshe. They rose up against Moses and with 250 of their cohorts. They were the leaders. So you have one group of friends here. So the Medrash tells an interesting story that when Korach was beginning to instigate others to come with him to challenge Moses' authority with a seemingly innocuous claim, hey, everybody's holy, we're all a great nation, why did you take upon yourself leadership? In a way you can say, I think I once wrote an article called Korach and Marx. That's as in Karl, not Groucho. That in a way this was the first challenge against social classes. That's what Korach was saying. It sounded so appealing. Everybody is equal in the eyes of God. Why did you take upon yourself leadership? Mind you that he himself wanted to be the leader, right, in the next sentence, but that was his argument. So I once wrote an article about comparing that to the Communist Manifesto by Marx and Engels, because it's very similar type of argument. And then what's the response? Because the argument does make sense. It is true. We don't need intermediaries. Everyone has a relationship directly with God. So it was a very appealing and seductive argument. And he presented it to these people. So the Medrash says that not everybody was seduced. Not everybody went along with him. And one of the Medrash says that there was a man called Ein ben Pelas who was also very intrigued by this approach, but his wife was able to convince him through her own charms not to go along with Korach. But Korach was both a charismatic man, a leader, and it says Pikach Chaya, he was wise, he was shrewd, however you translate Pikach. He was a smart man, and he had a very compelling argument. You look throughout history, these type of charismatic people create a type of camaraderie that's very hard to resist. Now, if it's a good friend, it creates a great alliance. If it's a bad friend, it creates tragedy. We don't need sociologists to know, especially in our formative teen years, that a friend can change your whole life. I've seen myself in my class, I remember my classmates, how one, I don't like to say a bad seed, but one guy that was trouble destroyed a few lives until this day. Because friends are very powerful. When we're in our teen years, in our teens, look, younger children are less corruptible and they don't have the same type of, but friends from early age, these are the first experiences we have outside of our family, our so-called nuclear family, are our friends. And even little children, they go to kindergarten, or preschool and so on. The first places they interact are with friends. But at that stage, because children are generally more innocent, generally speaking, children, the damage is less, and the whole thing is just more playful, so to speak. Even though in the 50s, who is it that wrote The Lord of the Flies? William Golden, right. Is he Jewish? Perfect. Very good. So, Lord of the Flies captured the imagination because it was the bizarre dimension of it. It was not the adults that were corruptible, it was the children. But there again, we're not talking about 2-year-olds. We're talking about, 10-year-olds approximately. I think that's the story. And it's quite chilling how children turn on one child. And you see it also in school. I remember myself as a child, I always felt bad. I don't think I used to gang up, but there was always these guys that would just easily gang up. There were these kids that were always these, pitiful souls. And everyone would gang up on them. And there was I remember I hated the game, remember the game Musical Chairs. Couldn't stand it. Not because I would lose. I actually used to usually be pretty good at it. But I couldn't stand the idea there's a game that one kid has to, today, they do it on all reality TVs, and they make sure that everybody feels humiliated. You're fired, or whatever it is, or the eject button, or the button, like a dungeon button. I mean, it's if you think about it, this is what people like to see, how others are so-called chastised or I guess, what are they called? Excommunicated. So even though it's done as a type of joke and so on and so forth, but it feeds into, let's put it this way, it's bottom feeding into the lowest common denominator, how we like have certain pleasure when somebody like loses. And you really make sure that they see the tears coming out of their eyes or something like that. So kids can do that. Kids can be very cruel. And that was the point of that book. Even though in most cases kids usually are more reflective of goodness than adults are. Adults can be much crueler than children could ever be. But then we reach our teen years, and then when friendships become a little more influential, influential in the sense that a friend introduces you to something. Usually it's a good friend. They do introduce you to something that is not so healthy. They can get to you much faster than anyone else can. Because it's someone you see every day, someone that you are friends with, someone that you hang around with. Peer pressure. That power of what friends do in school. Even in the context of learning about our sexuality, in the normal secular public school, which is not segregated. Where do you learn about sexuality? You learn it in school. You learn it from your friends. The older friends teach the younger ones. So it's like the blind leading the blind. And the influence of that is far deeper in many ways than what's going on at home or in other environments. I just want to qualify. It's not deeper in the sense, of course, our earliest experiences as children in our parents' home are probably the most profound ones. But deeper in this, simply I'm talking about on the conscious level of how we learn our tools. And then the pressure. The pressure. How many of us has shaped the peer pressure of not wanting to be a sissy, or not wanting to be different, and wanting to be cool? And how much does that impact our choices? And in the beginning, the first time you do it, it's not a big thing. But then this becomes your trajectory. This becomes your path. I've seen it. I think back my teen years, and I see things that happened to me, to others, that literally shaped you. And you're not threatened by your friends. When a stranger comes and tries to influence you, all your walls go up, your defenses go up. But friends are, you see them every day. And then friend introduces something. And I say whether it's drugs, whether it's in the world of sexuality, whether it's in just whatever one is doing. I think back about the foolishness. Sometimes you just follow somebody. Then I know the guy today. I say, how could I follow this idiot? But at the time, he was like the coolest guy in class. And he introduced something. Everybody said, hey, wow, that's something. And today I look at the guy, he's like a loser. I mean, I'm not mentioning names, and I hope he's not watching. But even if he is, So friends are a very interesting experience because in a way, you go home and your friends don't come home with you. I mean, in the real way, they don't live with you and stuff like that. So you're almost, as I said, your defenses are not up. But the influence of that is tremendous influence. And the only way really to do a true study would be, what would you be like if you had different friends? Taking case studies. I don't even know if you can fabricate these conditions because they're so natural. But how would some of us be, or all of us be, if we had met a different type of person when we were 17 years old, or 15 years old, or 20 years old? And of course, once we're thrust into the so-called mature adult world, and we have to go out and make a living, then you're dealing with a whole new circumstances. So then friends, it's good to have friends, but then there's business partners, and people have agendas, and your guard is up, even with friends, because everybody has something they want to sell or buy. So everything changes. But let's not underestimate the power of peer pressure. So I'm not going to address the mob mentality, the herd mentality that we discussed last week, which is, how we go along with something if everybody just is marching that way, how easy it is to just suddenly compromise your whole self because everybody's doing it, and to stand strong as an individual is not easy. But in some way it overlaps here, because here you have Korach doing exactly the same thing, instigating a whole group of people, and challenging Moses in the direct and most audacious way, and all the consequences that come out of it. So this is setting the stage of the fact that friends have big impact. So the question is, where do we go from here? We go from here is, let's analyze what a friend is. I think that's the way to begin. Before getting into who our friends are, and what friends we should choose and we shouldn't choose, what is a friend? What is the power of a friend? So we have the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, Pirkei Avos that some people study between the weeks between Passover and Shavuos, and some continue to study it every Shabbat throughout the summer, throughout the Shabbat, all the way through to Rosh Hashanah. So there's a very interesting statement in, I believe, the first chapter. It says, "Aseh lecha rav, uknei lecha chaver." And there's a third statement in that Mishnah. I'm trying to remember the lashon, the language for it. I don't think that's the third. Is there a siddur here? Huh? Come on, bring me a siddur a moment. Maybe you're right, but I want to just see it. Yeah, is that definite? Okay, we'll rely on Philip's memory. He says the third statement is to give everybody the benefit of doubt. Can you just double check? I just want to make sure. Anyway, no siddur in this joint. That's a little. Watch. Good. So, what's it when it says aseh? So let's translate aseh l'charav, which literally means make for yourself or create for yourself. Aseh means to create. Here, you could say it means to appoint for yourself a rav, a teacher. I would translate mentor, a rav, and knei l'cha chaver. The word knei in Hebrew is to acquire. That's a new thing that you're wrong.
No, totally wrong.
Totally. I'm totally going to be.
Hey, there's another mission. This and do this one. A friend judge each person.
No, you are right. Havadan kol adam l'kav zchus.
I didn't understand it.
Even when he's right, he thinks he's wrong. You need some real help. Some people, when they're wrong, they think they're right. If you're right, you think you're wrong. That's very bad. And you're looking inside. So,
it was in English.
Yeah, no, it is. Anyway, cry yourself a friend and judge every person favorably. Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you. So the Hebrew word is aseh lecha rav, knei lecha chaver, havadan kol adam l'kav zchus, which we'll hopefully talk about later if we have the time. Let's talk about the first two. So Hebrew, every word is precise. So you say the word aseh, it means it's not just being poetic and choosing different words. Aseh means aseh, knei means to acquire. Knei is actually the same word used when you acquire an acquisition, as in business, a kinyan, to purchase something. So some exchange of value, you buy something, you get something in return, that's called kinyan, to buy, to purchase, acquire. And by Rav, the expression is aseh lecha rav, which is to, as I said, to create or to make or to appoint for yourself a Rav. So interestingly, this Mishnah parallels a certain statement which Yeshaya, the prophet, speaks about the end of days. He speaks that at the end of the days there'll be a shiva shavtayach kevarishena v'yatzayach kevatchila. That I will return to you the judges that were of old, shiva shavtayach kevarishena as they were in the olden days, and yatzayach, your advisors kevatchila, as they were in the beginning. Basically referring to that, the end of days, when we reach that destination, Mashiach's time, Messianic age, the judges and the advisors that we had in the beginning, meaning the time of the temple, the time of Moses, will be returned to us. Today, we lack that type of counsel. We lack those type of wise and objective judges and counselors that we can turn to. So that's a prophecy. And there too you see two expressions, shefet. Shefet is very similar to a rav, like an authority, a judge. And Yotzayich is like a friend, a person who gives advice. A shefet is someone you go to for an authoritative position. A rav is someone you go to who's an authority who knows either better than you do, more familiar, someone you respect as an authority. You want an authoritative position. You want to know what should I do in this and this. You want a ruling, basically. And a friend, on the other hand, a yoyetz, a friend, a counselor, doesn't have that quite that same authority, but a friend has a power that an authority doesn't have. precisely because a teacher, because a mentor, or a shofet, or a judge, or a rav has authority, so it's not like you're equal. You're going to that person precisely because the person has a higher rank than you do, is more knowledgeable. You want someone to tell you the way it is, a ruling. When you go to a friend, it's like more of an equal that you're speaking to, where you talk objectively, you trust the person. A Rav, you have to still trust a Rav to be honest, but you don't have to have quite the same type of affinity as you do with a friend. A friend is someone you really know who can listen to you, has the patience. In authority, you don't even want to abuse an authority's time. It reminds me of a story that happened that I heard with the Rebbe, Rebbe. So there was this doctor that came. Was he a doctor? I think so. He came to see the Rebbe, and the truth is, he didn't really come to see. Someone told him to go see him. So he came, made an appointment in the mid-60s. This was late 60s, 1960s. That is, previous century. And he came to see the Rebbe, and the Rebbe gave him a chair. He sat down. I heard the story later from someone that heard it from him. And he's sitting there, and the Rebbe, this was what's called Yechidus, private audience. People would come in, spend some time. Some people spent a lot of time, some a few moments. And it's quiet. The Rebbe looks to him and says, is there anything that I can do for you? Anything I can help you with? Any questions? So he says, not really. So he says, so what are you doing here? The Rebbe asked him. He says, I'll tell you the truth, I don't really know. Someone told me that I was coming from another city. They said, if you go to New York, it's important for you to go see this rabbi. He's a very wise man. Now that I'm sitting here, I'm not really sure what I'm doing here. So the Rebbe said to him, look, I'm not accustomed to sitting with someone who doesn't want to be here. But since you're here already, and everything is divine providence, maybe we can use the time in a productive way. Maybe you can find something that is on your mind. So the guy was a sharp guy, so he says to the Rebbe, he says to him, okay, well, let's start with this. Who are you? Why do people adore you and adulate you this way? That a guy will just tell me, a total stranger, to come to New York, you got to go see the Rebbe. So the Rebbe said to him, well, I'd like to see myself, this is how he responded, I'd like to see myself as a friend. So the doctor was taken aback, and he said, a friend? I don't know what words he used, but I guess he basically, the thrust of it was that I'm not that impressed. I have a lot of friends. What's so special about the friend? So the Rebbe said to him, let me define for you what a friend is, and you tell me how many friends you have, based on my definition. And the Rebbe went on and said like this: a friend is someone that you could speak to just as if you were speaking to yourself. Your defenses are not there. Total trust. They won't judge you. They won't criticize you. So as if you talk to yourself. That's what a real friend is. So then he turned to the doctor. The Rebbe smiled and said to him, so tell me, how many friends do you have like that? He said, I have no such friends. I don't even believe there could be such a friend. He said, I'm too cynical to believe there's such friends. Everybody wants something. And the Rebbe said, I feel sad. I feel sad for you that you never found such a friend, but that's what I tried to be for people. This was like, a moment that I don't really know what happened later in that room. I don't know what happened years later. This fellow went through a whole journey, and I guess the Rebbe became his friend in some ways. But it just struck me, here's a great Rebbe, and I wasn't struck by his humility or struck by the fact that he was not into talking about himself and start telling him who I am. I was struck by the way he defined what a friend is and what a person can really achieve. Whether we will ever find a friend of that caliber that you can speak to as if you're speaking to yourself. Hopefully, maybe we could, maybe. But to understand that there is such a standard is also valuable. In other words, to appreciate that many people will not be that way, that type of friend to you, doesn't mean it's healthy or normal. It means the anomaly is that we just don't know how to be friends. for whatever reason, whether it's because we're insecure, or because we're selfish, or because we're just lazy, or just thinking about ourselves most of the time, whatever the reason is. So it's a standard, and it's a standard that should not be underappreciated. What I mean by that is, yes, we use the word friends lightly, like we use many words. We use the word love lightly. I love you. Love at first sight. If two people meet in 5 seconds, they love each other. Is that love, or is that infatuation, or is that a crush, or is that just a moment of insanity? The real things in life, if you really think about them, don't just happen in split seconds. So the word friend, chaver, the word friend has a lot of meaning, many meanings. And what I just described is like the ultimate meaning, obviously. But even on another level, the reason that we don't identify with such a type of relationship is because we know ourselves. You look at the workplace. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people tell me, I've been betrayed by the closest friend I had. I thought this was my friend, years and years and years. We could never hurt each other, and then he or she betrayed me in the worst possible way. I'm not talking about a mistake or a misunderstanding, or sometimes you have to. Sometimes I know people have also made a mistake. They thought someone betrayed them, and they find out it never happened, and it was just some slander. But it has happened unfortunately, more than often than not. It happens in the workplace. People who work together come even into the same firm or same company together, and then the market competition, and then especially good bosses who know how to manipulate their workers, make sure they play them against each other, and suddenly you see two people who could be very close, who were very close, stabbing each other in the back because each one wants to gain favor, wants to climb the ladder, wants the next raise, wants the next promotion, etc., etc. And of course, we start justifying anything, and you can justify anything. You really mean that? If I come to a higher position, I'll be even more friend to the guy. But the fact is, the forces around us, the competitive forces, others who try to use us, can end up causing friends to turn on each other. And it's sad to hear, because what happens is, when a person is betrayed by someone that's very close, you start losing faith in mankind. You start thinking, okay, who's the next good friend of mine that's going to basically mess me up and betray me? And you start losing the type of so-called innocence and faith in people. So the first thing is to know that it all comes down to really not just about faith in others, it's about faith in yourself. The real question, this is how a chassid would really look at it, is not whether other people can be a friend to me. The question is, can you be a friend to anyone? Are you the person you'd like to have a friend? In other words, would you do that to someone else? Would you screw someone, pardon the expression? Would you betray someone if it was your interest? Are you able to be such a friend to someone? And it's not about judging yourself. Let's just call a spade a spade. Let's say we really can't be such a friend. But then you cannot blame others either. But it's not about pointing fingers. It's about rising up to a higher standard. You see, Korach was a very wise man. And there are books and books about and explain pages that explain what his intentions were. How could such a man rise up against Moses? Moses was not a small person. Korach was not an idiot. So there are many explanations. I'm not going to go into them right now because it'll digress. But what happens is that a person like that, when a person gets distorted, then the ball starts rolling and you never know where it's going to fall. Korach became his own god in a way. He was so sure that he's right, he probably didn't have a friend himself. Forget about an authority. So when the Mishnah says, Knei lecha chaver, which means to acquire yourself a friend, that's interesting. The word acquire is like almost a strange word here. You think more, acquire would seem more like for a Rav than for a friend. A friend is not an acquisition. You don't buy a friend. I mean, if you can buy a friend, he's not a friend. That means he's being bought by your pay or whatever it is, the benefits, the rewards that he's getting from you. So what is the meaning of Knei lecha chaver and Aseh lecha Rav? So Aseh lecha Rav is explained in some places that the word Aseh in Hebrew, Aseh, Asiyah, comes from the word kfiyah, which means to coerce. It means that appointing a mentor, or a teacher, an authority, requires sometimes coercing yourself. Because who wants to have an authority? It's one thing, you have someone you can listen to, you don't listen to. The statistics show that most consultants that people pay top dollar, they don't listen to. So why do they pay them? I don't know, I guess they feel good that they could say they consulted with someone. But many people just don't even listen to their own consultants. So to really accept an authority requires a certain amount of discipline, a certain kabbalat all, a certain type of subjugating yourself. So the word asi is used, asay meaning not just create, it means to force it upon yourself. Not actually the word force, but it's it's like a commitment type of thing. But the word knei, how does that fit in with a friend? So if I may for a moment, I'm going to go into a little mystical journey here. That goes into the spiritual worlds, and then we'll bring it back to the practical dimension of a friend. In Kabbalistic Hasidic thought, everything is looked upon like there's a root in their symptoms. So if you go to a trained eye of any type of trained person, what does it really mean as an expert, an experienced person, someone that's an expert? Expert has a look. They see something, they don't just look at the symptoms, they can tell you the cause. This is true across the board. This is a medical doctor who's really trained. You come to the doctor, you tell him your symptoms, and he'll be able to isolate it down to a few items that are possible. I'm not talking about, obviously there's always exceptions, but they're general things. You have a pain, God forbid, in a certain area, a few tests, he can zero down, he can isolate, eliminate, through a process of elimination, down to a few things, and can keep on going until he figures out what the root of it is. Sometimes doctors, and you can see it always, an expert, in a split second, you tell them something, they tell you it's probably this. That comes with hard-earned experience, trial and error, and so on. The same is true, trained eye in anything. People who, for example, look in business, people see trends. There's some people who see a trend where all of us will see chaos. Some people will see an opportunity where everybody else sees loss. Now, nobody's perfect, but still a trained eye, either it's instinct, it's experience, it's discipline, so on and so forth. In any area that is, I can speak for myself. I can't say, no one wants to call themselves an expert. I write, I'm a writer, and people show me their writing, and I could pretty much identify pretty quickly, It's always easier, by the way, to edit than to write, meaning to edit somebody else, to criticize someone else, so to speak. And if you're a writer, you can point and say how an idea should be expressed and stuff like that. But that comes with experience and with your own know-how. And everybody here has, I'm sure, areas where, almost like a knee-jerk reaction, you can identify something. But in Hasidic thought, and it's interesting, in real profound Torah thought, the same is seen psychologically and also even physically. The entire universe, the way the Hasidic map looks at it, the spiritual map, is a symptom to deeper underlying causes. It's a different way of thinking. We see it medically, we understand it. We understand it in the business world. We understand it in the political world. But we don't usually think of it in terms of the physical world. Let me explain myself. Today we know that a volcano, earthquake, other natural, so-called natural events like thunder, lightning, we know the causes for them. We may hear a clap of thunder, but there's a whole process that allows that thunder to take place. So science, in a way, is also the trained eye of looking at not the root, not the symptoms, but the roots. Some religious critics like to point out that the primitive people thought that the earthquake was God quaking, God getting angry. But today we know an earthquake is the plates, tectonic plates, and the rubbing against each other. But the fact of the matter is that even physical roots also have roots. How deep can you go? We know the conscious, for example, is affected by the unconscious. Now, there's an unconscious. How many levels of unconscious are there that shape your behavior? Now, we've only gone that far. We look today at physical phenomena, and we all know there are molecules. Well, before molecules, there are elements. There's a table of elements. And elements are made up of molecules. H2O is water. Molecules, we know, today are made up of smaller particles called atoms. Atoms are made up of subatomic particles. And today we've already discovered even subatomic particles. They're just beginning to discover them. Now those subatomic particles are invisible to the eye, and no one has ever seen them, but you see its impact, its effect. You see it from the symptoms, you understand there's a root. How deep, how far down the rabbit hole can we go? No one knows. As a matter of fact, the deeper you go, the more you see. That it can be endless in a way. So here's where the metaphysical enters into the picture. So take an example. A person cries. Tears come out of the person's eyes. So you look at a tear, study a human tear, and you can magnify it and analyze it. It comes from a tear duct. It's somewhat salty. You know, it's a mysterious thing. How does a tear suddenly emerge? You have an emotion. It wells up. In some way, suddenly turns into a tear in your tear duct, and you cry. So when we look at another person crying, all you see are tears. But we know the tears are not the cause of your sadness. It's the sadness that's the cause of the tears. Same thing as when you see a smile on someone's face. It's not the smile that makes them happy. There's some happiness for some reason, and scientists try to understand why does it turn into some type of contortion that looks like what we call a smile. The mouth turning a certain way, the eyes a certain way, and so on. So now just apply the same principle to physical phenomena. It's raining outside. So raining, we take an umbrella. If you're from Chelam, you take an umbrella with holes. You know that joke? Where a guy goes out with an umbrella, it starts raining, so his friend says, open your umbrella. He says, it's full of holes. He says, so why'd you take it? He says, because I didn't expect it to rain. You know. This is the Chelam psychology. We do many things like that, you know. It's called insurance. So we take an umbrella, you take a raincoat. There are people today obsessed with the Weather Channel. When they started, remember the Weather Channel started, no one thought it could succeed. Who wants to watch 24 hours weather? It became a huge success. I don't know, I guess when your life is out of control, seeing the weather patterns and you think you're predicting things maybe gives you a sense of some semblance of, I don't know what it is. It's some psychological mishigas. I see that. You see it every night at the news with the maps and all the things. And usually their predictions, as we know in New York, they don't really pan out, especially when it comes to snowstorm. But I guess it's like, people like to see maps and weather patterns and what do they call it? Most people don't even know what a barometer is, but they keep telling you the barometer, and always what gets me is also the wind direction. So I understand if you're a sailor or something, but like why do we need to know if you're in New York City that the wind is like 10 miles an hour from the southeast or something? But, okay, so be it. A little social parody here. Okay, that's what. So meteorologists will tell you the deeper reasons, the underlying reasons, the cloud patterns, what's it called? The low and high, whatever they're called. Pressure systems, right? Low and high pressure systems. Don't ask me exactly what that is. I just know the expression. Something about lows if the low hits the high, it creates some storm. Something like that, right? It makes sense. It's also, I know emotionally it makes sense. When your low hits your high, it's going to create fireworks. So bottom line is that the meteorologists will give you a deeper picture. But take the same example I mentioned with tears and emotions. Why should we not say, and this is where the metaphysical comes in, and Chassidus talks about this, the Zohar, the Kabbalah talks about it, that perhaps when it's raining, it's really maybe angels crying. Maybe rain is a form of a cosmic emotion, a cosmic spiritual emotion, that just like the emotion within us turns into tears, changes meteorological patterns, which in turn cause it to rain. In other words, it's all about understanding the roots and the roots of the roots to get to the root cause of things. So it's true, many people who may stop at the physical and they say, you know what, I stop at meteorology. I'm not interested in knowing the spiritual. But I'm just adding here that the Torah has a whole dimension called inner Torah, Pnimius Torah. And it's essential really it's understanding of the cosmic forces that are lying, that make the world tick. So you hear about the 10 spheres, and you hear about the 4 worlds, and you hear about this tzimtzum, different ideas. I'm sure some of you are familiar with. What it really is, these are things no one has ever seen, but you also don't see DNA, and you also don't see subatomic particles, and you also don't see emotions that are the cause of your tears. As I said, as tangible as tears may be, they're not the cause. All they are is an external symptom. I'm not minimizing it, but it's the end of the process, not the beginning of the process. So what do we know about the beginning of the process? So when you study Hasidic thought, what you learn is a map. There's a map. There's a map of existence. There's a map. So if we were standing right now in front of a beautiful meadow, I especially say a meadow, not a man-made structure. As beautiful as the structure may be, but a man-made meadow, a beautiful meadow. You see flowers, you see colors, you see butterflies, you see birds, trees, grass, the works. This is green, this is blue, this is yellow. You see the sun or the moon, whatever it may be. So we all will take in this sight in a very, I guess, it's a beautiful poetic sight. It affects us in certain ways. It's harmony, tranquil, calm, whatever the meditation that leads you. And each of us may have different feelings. A scientist standing there can even tell you why is green, why is grass green. The whole process of photosynthesis and all the different factors that cause how things grow, why they grow. And science has an entire study on nature. If a Kabbalist was standing there, he would tell you the green grass reflects the level of Tiferes. Tiferes, the third day when vegetation was created. The blue sky is Malchus, because it's blue. Malchus says, Yam Demel Rekia, Rekia Demel Kisei Kova Demel Malchus. As translated into English, that means that the sea is blue because it reflects the sky is blue because it reflects the supernal throne, and the supernal throne reflects Malchus. Now, of course, on a spiritual level, spirituality is not physically blue, but let's say the emotions that blue elicits from us, and we know colors elicit things. It's not an accident that a red light is a red light, because red is a very powerful reaction. It is a reaction that causes us to feel danger. It symbolizes fire. People naturally, viscerally, without even thinking, red always is something that always creates some type of stop. That's why it's red. So colors have real impact. So we understand the color, but the color has a psychology behind the color. And behind the psychology there's a spirituality. And every color has a corresponding sphere in the spiritual spheres. So everything in this universe is really, you can say, a configuration of a whole composite of spheres interacting with each other. The 10 building blocks are 10 spheres, but the 10 are multiplied by 10. 10 times 10 is 100. Those 100 have 10 more, it's 1,000. So if you look at something, you can say, this is chesed within gvura within tiferes, for example. And you really can go even further than that if you are trained enough. So existence really, for a person who's trained like that, looks beyond the packaging, beyond the outer layers, and you see a whole different map. Remember those maps? I used to like them, those maps that, like a map of a body or topography, like with plastic. Every time you took a plastic, this was like the mountain ranges, and this was this. You know what I mean? Those, what are they called? They still have those things? Not only an atlas. They had about a different type of maps, and every time you turned it, then suddenly you saw the whole human body. And then you only saw the vein structure or the neurological structure. It's interesting because you see the layers of reality, basically, and it's extremely intriguing. So Kabbalah is a whole study of understanding those underlying forces. Why am I saying this long introduction? What does it have to do with being friends? Well, it has something to do with being friends. The word kinyan, I said before, acquiring, in Hasidic thought, is associated with the world of Atzilus. So you may know there's the four worlds. The four worlds are Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. You'll understand the relevance in a few minutes to our discussion here. What is in practical terms, what is the difference between these four worlds? The difference between these four worlds is everything in every plan, every project, whether it's a business, whether it's your own personal life plan, whether it's whatever it may be, consists of 4 steps. 4 steps. Everything begins, number one, with a vision. A vision. If you don't have a vision of something, you can't go ahead and build. After you have that vision turns into an outline. That's Bria. Atzilus is the vision. Bria is an outline. Bria is what's called like body without shape. Think of it like when you see a building starting to go up, all you see is the framework. Or if you make an outline in a plan, the outline, before it's fleshed out, that's Bria. Yetzira is Tzura, is shape and form. You start fleshing it out. And Asiya is the final product, and you finish it. Any healthy project must have these 4 steps. You begin with some vision, with some unified image that you want. You then lay it out in a certain, here's the outline, basic principles. You flesh that out, and then you finish the finished product. And Seif Maisa b'machshava tchila, the end product should reflect the original vision. Now, the difference between these 4 is not small. For example, let's use construction as an example. If the person who lays out the blueprint, the architect, and then whoever is overseeing the project, the contractor, has to have the whole picture in mind. So you have a blueprint, everything, the electrical plan, the plumbing plan, the structural plan, etc., etc. And then that person goes ahead and hires teams for each part of the building. Imagine, for example, middle of the construction, the electrician says to the plumber, you know something, I think we should put the electricity here and the plumbing there. What will happen? You'll have instead of a building, you'll have chaos. Because the bricklayers and the plumbers and all those that are implementing are following a bigger plan. And they can't just come and suddenly say, hey, I'm going to do it the way I like. Because it's all coordinated. Now, who could see that? Only the one that has that vision. Well, I could take a composer of music. You have stories where the composer starts hearing how those that arrange the music, and they mess up the whole thing. Because the arranger or somebody decided, you know what, this piece doesn't belong there. And then the composer is about to faint. Now, it could sometimes be the composer's arrogance, but often, because he understands the vision. And he says, you're taking out that little detail, affects the whole picture. Now think of it in our lives. How many of us work that way? Who's running the show in your life? Is it the bricklayers, the electricians, the plumbers? Or is it the visionary? Is it the architect? Do you have a blueprint? I just want to point out how something that makes so much sense in any business plan, in any construction, in any project, where you need to go through these 4 steps in that order. You can't begin with Yetzirah fleshing out before you have an outline. And you can't have an outline before you have a vision. Well, in our personal lives, there's no particular order. Most of us really just reacting to circumstances. Something comes up. So if you think about it from let's call it a Kabbalistic map, love, let's take chesed. Love should work. It should begin with a vision in chesed of Atzilus. Chesed of Atzilus should inform the chesed of Bria. Now you're going to look for something that fulfills the vision of how love is supposed to be like. That in turn turns into chesed of Yetzirah, the next step, and then finally the chesed of the full final picture. But in most cases, most of us, what is love? Whatever comes your way. As Bob Dylan sings, he'll marry the first woman he meets. That's where he's at. So in other words, what defines your emotional patterns and your emotional routines, and not just emotions, everything. It's not necessarily starting from your inner Atzilus, let's put it that way. So in a healthy human being, if you use the Kabbalistic map, and this would be a great project to create a psychological map that can be used by everybody, practically speaking, you'd be able to identify and say, you know what? Your chesed, your love is very nice, but it's on a Yetzirah level, it's on a Asiyah level. It's lacking the Atzilut level. So Atzilut, in this sense, is really like the vision, the unifying vision of life. And this brings me back to Knei Lecha Chaver. The word kinyan in Hasidic texts is always used to describe the world of Atzilus. It's always called kinyan. Why is it a kinyan? Because kinyan, as I said, means to acquire. It means something's passed on from one state to another. Atzilus has a vision power because it's not a created entity. It's what we call something that's imparted. Let me explain. When someone, let's say, purchases an item, so the only difference that changes is exchange of ownership. The item itself is the same. As a matter of fact, if something changes, you were cheated. When you go ahead and buy a product, you're expecting to get the product that you were told is the product. The only difference is the product belonged to someone else. Now, for exchange of whatever you gave them, for money or whatever the exchange was, now it's yours. So Chassidus says that's the type of experience that is not something that is new. It's just an exchange going from one place to the next. What would be the contrast? The contrast to that would be that, let's say, I pay you to build me something. So that's not an exchange of an item that was my property and I just sold it to you. Or your property and you sold it to me. There, you're actually paying someone to go create a piece of art. That art was not there before. So that's used to explain something that is like a created entity, what we call Bria. How does it relate in our lives psychologically? We have both things in our lives. A good friend, as I mentioned before, as the Rebbe said, is someone that you have no defenses. It's as if you're speaking to yourself. There's no in-betweens. When you go, for example, to a Rav, to an authority, you're not going to someone who's just going to open your heart to and understands you and is on your level. You're actually going to get an opinion that you don't. That it's like I said, like hiring someone to paint a piece of art for you. You're going to this authority to give you a position that you'll not get except from this authority. So there you have to submit a say in a form of kfir, in a form of subjugating yourself to hear that person. That's our relationship with God, you can say, as a master and a servant. Where God is the master, we're the servant. That's the world of Bria, Yitzira, and Asiya. That's a world that's detached from the divine. But we also have a relationship with God like a chaver. It says, Rashi writes in the Talmud, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, to love your friend as yourself. Remember, the word friend is used there too. The re'acha goes on God. That sometimes V'ahavta l'recha kamocha refers to loving God. Because God's referred to our friend. So is God a friend of ours or is God our creator? So Hasidic thought explains God has both dimensions. That there's a relationship with God that we have that is more out of awe and respect that you have to an authority. And then there's a relationship with God that you have as you have with I wouldn't say an equal, but with someone that relates to your terms, on your terms. God did not want a relationship that's just a master and a subject. A master and a slave. God wanted a relationship that's like a husband and wife or friends. And God wanted re'echa. There's that same kol deidi defik. So you have God as a friend, God as a creator. There's different levels. And why is this so important? Because when you have a relationship with anyone, sometimes you hear the beautiful expression where I was unfortunately at a funeral a while back, a few months ago, and the guy was eulogizing his wife. They were married many years. And the thing that was struck me, which, you've heard it's somewhat of a cliche, but it wasn't a cliche because it was coming from his heart. But he said, I didn't just lose my wife, I lost my best friend. And it was true, because I knew them, and it was a best friend. It's not common. It's not common. There are people not everybody you love, you also like. And not everybody you like, do you love. Let's put it that way. To love someone and like this person that you love is a certain level. And I was thinking about it afterwards. Unfortunately, he passed away himself. He couldn't live without his best friend. Let's put it this way. You know who it is? Arthur and Stella Gold. And they were like from high school, sweethearts. 17. And, it's a whole story of its own. I've told they were self-proclaimed atheists, mind you. But for some reason they loved this class. I don't know why. I talk about God all the time, but I think I do know why, because I guess the atheists, the God they don't believe in, I also don't believe in. Let's put it this way. As Rabbi Jacobson said. But they were a wonderful, unbelievable couple. And so I was thinking about it, that, in a relationship you have to have what we call in Jewish lingo, in the Torah lingo, you have Ava and Yira. You have Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. It's usually translated as love of God and fear of God. The truth is, fear of God is a very misleading word, because fear always implies, a very negative. Fear is a demoralizing element. The real word should be awe of God. Awe. Because that's what Yiras Hashem is. It's awe. So love is a sense of closeness. Awe is a sense of distance, but good distance. Like standing in awe of a beautiful scene in nature. You're completely humbled by something that's so far beyond you. So, when you think of it that way, a relationship has to have both elements. Two people who are not close to each other, obviously there's no intimacy, there's no friendship, there's no affinity, are not going to have a relationship. On the other hand, if people are just close to each other, and there's no respect for the sanctity of another person's boundaries, or the sanctity of another person's self, there's also no relationship. Very many unhealthy relationships are such, where there's one person who's dominant, the other one is completely passive. It's not a relationship. It's a relationship when one person is not there, essentially. One person has to annihilate themselves for the other person to be. So the relationship is really a dance. The dance is, how do you balance these two? The Rebbe once told a couple that when you're close, when you should be distant, you'll be distant when you should be close. You think about it, it's an unbelievable thought. It's not just about the laws of mikveh and taras mishpacha, it's really a psychological thing. There are times, not that people should be distant, but there are times where everybody needs their space. And space doesn't mean that there is no love. On the contrary, space means that there's an identity here. Two distinct identities have come together and joined as one. Like they say, like that. So it's two circles. But they become one. Not that one has to disappear for the other one to exist. Now that takes maturity, it takes confidence, security, it takes trust, it takes a lot of things. That a person should be able to both be vulnerable and at the same time be themselves. And that is really the balance. So we learn it all from God's relationship with us. Avos Hashem, God didn't just want us distance. Distance is where we understand, as in Hasidic thought, it talks about God is so beyond us. We're finite, God is infinite. Not just infinite, is beyond infinite. Beyond infinite. And we start thinking about it, it creates a understanding that we're simply absolutely insignificant in the big picture. Not in any way to demoralize us, but to realize it's a bigger reality. Don't take yourself so seriously. There's a bigger world. There's a bigger reality. There's a bigger picture. It lifts you actually. It empowers you. But that's Yiras Hashem. That's understanding the God that is beyond us. In Hasidic language, that's called Seviv Kalam. Beyond. What it evokes in us, a sense of awe, a sense of bittul, humility, a sense that you're not it. There's a bigger picture than you. But then, and this is the key, there's also Mamala Kalam. There's also as God manifests within existence. It says, Mipsari Achzelaka, from my flesh I behold God. Within nature we can see God's footprints or fingerprints. In other words, the universe is created, and the human being was created in the image of God. The universe is created with a wisdom that reflects God's wisdom. And when you think about it, what creates a relationship then is a close relationship, because you look at yourself and you say, I'm a reflection. So it's an understanding. You begin to understand God, not just stand in awe. And that creates Avos Hashem. That's love. If you want to apply that to personal relationships, every relationship needs these two things. I was just at a wedding yesterday in Charlotte, and I was asked to speak as MC. So, by the veiling, why is there a veiling? Why did Rebecca cover her face when Isaac met her? And why, thousands of years, the custom is that the groom puts a veil upon the bride? So the technical reason is she was in a sense a certain type of healthy sense of dignity, of tzniut, of when you really love someone, you're vulnerable, you cover your face, like when people close their eyes when they kiss each other. There's a certain type of respect. But on a deeper level, it's also reflecting that what you see is not what you get. A veil, relationships have become somewhat, everybody is accessible all the time to everybody. You can access anything. No, a relationship has to be with sanctity. You don't enter the Holy of Holies, marching in on your terms. That type of sanctity, which is so much lacking today, is a critical component in a relationship. The understanding that that the people that are closest to you shouldn't take for granted. To understand that there's a sanctity to a life, and sanctity includes there's a mystery to another human being. You'll never get men will never get women, and women probably will never get men, even though they argue about it. When I say not get, I mean it in a good way, not because they're two different, Mars and Venus, but because there are layers that we cannot see, and it's healthy to know that. It's healthy to know about a person you love that you don't fully understand them. That way you don't own them. They are distinct than you are, and you still love them. And you can trust someone even if they're not exactly like you. You don't need a clone. That's not a relationship. A relationship is two distinct individuals, each to their own sense of self, that have chosen and they come together as one. That is a true relationship. Is that more complicated? Of course. It's much easier if you can just control the other person and tell them what you want, when you want it. And that way there's nothing unpredictable. But then it's not a relationship. Then it's a master and a slave. I don't care how you package it. Even if everybody's happy with the arrangement. And God didn't want that, and that's not what healthy relationships are about. So this brings us back to friends and authorities. A friend is Atzilus. It's the way we become a friend with God. Atzilus, Chassidus says, is a bridge between the divine and the human. We were created in the image of God. What does the image of God look like? Atzilus is that image. Now we all know God is beyond any image. But God chose to manifest himself in something that we can relate to. It's like an interface. A good friend is an interface between you and a more objective truth. So I know I went off here in a more esoteric dimension of it, but I think if you bring it back to, on a practical level, what I began discussing, think about a friend in that way, it's an amazing resource that, as I said, we don't really access properly, and as I'll soon discuss, we also in many ways screw things up with our friends. A friend is a gift from God, different than parents, different than spouse, and different than authorities. That is something that you choose. Friend is not something you're obligated. You don't sign contracts with friends. I mean, I don't mean if you go into business with a friend, you should sign a contract. They say, you need more contracts with friends than you do with enemies. But I mean to say you don't sign a contract in the friendship part of it. As friends, it's like you don't sign, we're going to be friends. Friends, it comes through trust. It comes through a willing type of communication. But you find the right friend in your life, it can change your life in the deepest ways possible. So here's like a practical way of looking at it. We all have our Rolodexes. What do they call them today? Databases, I don't know. Communication lists, what do we call them? What do you call your contacts? Or contact lists, right? Contacts. And we have, of course, our Facebook friends. I forgot to mention that. Facebook has elevated the concept of a friend to, and it's strange. You say just yesterday, I was there in Charlotte. Someone I said, "Oh, hey, Rabbi Jacobson, I know you. We're friends on Facebook." What do you say? What am I supposed to say? I'm not your friend, So I said, "We're friends, but I still don't know you." So today you can have a friend you don't even know you have a friend. But the point being is that you look at your contact lists. And there are people that you don't call usually, and there are people you do call. Everybody's got their... I think Facebook made a limit of 5,000 because they said that most people in their lifetimes don't really call more than a few hundred people. So forget about thousands. But so you look at this list of yours, and then you think to yourself, maybe to step back, these are my friends. What does it mean to be one of my friends? So, friends on a basic level is people you can call on, let's go to a movie, let's go to a party, let's do this, let's do that, let's hang out, let's just talk. People you can call up and just continue a conversation that you're having for 40 years already, and as if you're just continuing from yesterday. And we have different reasons we call our friends. But then let's use a different type of barometer. How many people on your list are people that if you call them up with some enthusiasm and excitement about something, they'll make sure to remind you very quickly that you shouldn't get so excited. Basically, the people who throw cold water on everything. How many people that you call friends, when you meet them, you feel uplifted by them? And how many people you feel drained by them? So you think to yourself, how can I have a friend that drains me? But we have friends that drain us. That's how it is, because it's routine. Friends doesn't mean necessarily that they're doing the best for you. It means someone that you're acquainted with. Someone you know from who knows how many years. So I'm not suggesting, because I don't want to be sued by anybody, that you should just dump many of your friends. I am suggesting maybe to review the list from time to time. And more importantly, maybe to introduce a little fresh air. It's an interesting question. It's a very uncomfortable question. But if you went over to someone and said, tell me, when you meet me, do you feel drained by me or do you feel empowered by me? Okay, very few people are going to tell you the truth. But let's put it this way. If they don't tell you that you feel empowered, you can rest assured you're probably drained. They're not going to say, you drain me. They'll say, well, it depends, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, it's hard to, do we really know ourselves that well? And it's an interesting question. It's a very vulnerable question. How many of us are going to just like to hear that you know something? I think I'm helping people, and I'm finding out that just rather I shouldn't call them. I don't mean to that extreme, but you get the idea. So I think this chapter, because Korach went ahead and built his friendship, which ended up, of course, being a disaster for them all, is a good opportunity. We always try to learn positive lessons to look at our contact list. Our 250 people on our list, to see what's going on a bit. I know this, that's in a way it's one of the easiest things to change in your life, is a friend. I don't mean easy to get rid of an old friend, I'm not suggesting that, but I mean it's not something that requires a whole effort. Introducing a new friend that brings a certain fresh air into your life, gives you hope, gives you confidence. It's not that it may be difficult to find such a friend, but it's not such a difficult thing to do. It's not as difficult, for example, to start suddenly to repair your own old a bad habit of yours. So it may be a good opportunity to look at that and understand that in addition to authorities and mentors, as I said, parents, there's also the knei l'chachaver, finding someone that is like you can really speak to. And there are people like that. I've never made it a campaign, but I've introduced some people over the years, and it's beautiful to see certain relationships can sprout out of it, and certain connections. And these things can help you tremendously, especially you're preparing the years of plenty for the years of famine. When you have a good friend, and God forbid the day comes and you need, you have that resource, you have that insurance, so to speak. Obviously, you don't want to have just rainy day friends, only friends you call upon only when things aren't going that well. My father, I remember, told me years ago, my brother had he had a little accident, and he fell. They took him to the hospital. It was a scary moment. Nothing happened, but it was at the moment scary. So it was like at night. So my father sent a message over to the Rebbe's house, maybe 11 o'clock at night, to let him know the blessing that everything should work out all right. Okay, fine. He did that. Then in the morning, my father gets a phone call from the secretary and says the Rebbe wanted to know what happened. And everything worked out. Like by 3 o'clock, it was more or less pretty much straightened out. She says, oh, thank God, everything happened. So the Rebbe sent him a message and said, I stayed up worrying all night that everything was all right. A lesson. We come to people when we need them. And then we forget to tell them there's some good news. And it's a lesson it's a small menschlich lesson too, but it has also profound implications because it just shows us the fact is, we could be a little narcissistic and sometimes selfish, especially when you're needy. When you're needy, you suddenly, I'll do anything. And then when things work out, you suddenly forget some of your promises or some of your blessings in your life. So we all know how to call someone up on the phone when things are not going well. You console them, a condolence call and stuff like that. But when's the last time you call up a friend and just say, hey, I just want to say, I'm thinking about you, you're a nice guy, or, I want to thank you for being there. These things have very big impact precisely because there's no objective. You're not gaining anything from it. It's just a relationship. But you have to have, obviously, a higher sensitivity because we live in a callous world and most of us are busy with all kinds of maneuverings, and understandably so. But it's good to reserve a pure spot in your heart for a friend, and vice versa, finding a friend that will reserve a spot like that for you. And maybe sometimes we could find someone that will never sell you out, let's put it that way. I'm not suggesting that, unfortunately sometimes best friends have hurt each other, especially when it comes to ulterior motives. Money, other things can suddenly contaminate even the most beautiful. But the point is that there is hope for mankind. Right, Philip? What do you think? Yeah? There's hope for mankind. And I would say this, that though I can't compare myself to the greats that I've learned under, but I pride myself to feel like I'm a friend to some people in this world, and maybe bring a smile to their face once in a while. It's good to be able to. It's also a healthy thing because it has a certain cleansing element to it, and it's not something I'm not suggesting. It's not how shall I put it? We live in this fast food age where everything is like fast remedies. To go ahead and suddenly say, okay, I'm going to create a friend button, that you start pressing a friend, that it's another medication or something. That's not what I'm talking about, obviously. I'm talking about something a little more natural. And as I'm thinking about it, I think of a few people I have to call. So I won't do it tonight, but some people, I take for granted over the years. I've once I left school, I probably lost contact with most of my classmates, and vice versa. And I think back, maybe it would have been worthwhile to stay in touch with a few, but I don't know if we can remedy that. So we have to sometimes make new friends. But anyway, on a concluding note, I'll say this, that please see me as a friend, and hopefully I could see you as a friend. And if we all created some type of ripple effect, where each of us does a little part, those quiet moments, unsung hero moments where people can help somebody without any cameras and fanfare and medals and awards, those are very beautiful things. I'll just say that Miriam, the sister of Moses, though she was a sister, so there's a very moving episode where you read in the beginning of Exodus, Shmos, where because of Pharaoh's decree, he told that they should kill all the newborn males. So Yocheved, the mother of Moses, put him and hid him in a basket at the edge of the river Nile. But because she was concerned, so she sent her daughter Miriam, who was older than Moses, to stand by and watch. There's a beautiful verse, just a very moving verse. You can see, power in the verse, where it says that and a sister Miriam would stand and watch over the little boy. Years later, she would be rewarded. Moses would not move on because of her sensitivity. You think about it. One little episode, a little girl standing behind some bushes, I guess, near the river Nile, and watching her little brother. Moments like that are usually not captured on film. They're not captured. Today I'm sure they'll capture everything, and everything becomes a whole thing. But the fact is that the most precious moments in life, when your own mother or father cradled you, you probably beyond even earlier than any of our memories. Those little acts of gentleness, of sensitivity, of nurturing, that happens, change people's lives. And don't think it ends just when we grow up. It doesn't end. It happens forever. The only difference is, as adults, we don't admit it as quickly. We also don't let anyone in as quickly, and we have our sophisticated armor surrounding us. But don't ever think that a person doesn't have that inner child within them. And you never know when you say a word to somebody, both harshly or sensitively, how you can change worlds. It's true, we've learned to protect ourselves, and as I said, we live in a world that is desensitized, but never underestimate it. And that's really what a real friend is about. So you could even be a friend to a stranger. Maybe some of you may not meet again, but you did a friendly thing. That person will never forget the gesture. And in a world where so many gestures are unfortunately the other direction, you see it in road rage or in other ridiculous situations where people anger about simply meaningless things. So to counter that, in a way, to bring a drop of kindness is it's a pretty good thing to do, and especially if you do it in a way where where it's not expected. A situation where everybody would think that everybody's just going to be a cold New Yorker. To do something a little different is pretty interesting. What it does for others and also for yourself. It's to surprise yourself. And being that we all, as we grow older, our arteries harden, and so do our personalities. it doesn't hurt to once in a while to show that you have a little soft spot, where you can still do something that's sometimes spontaneous and somewhat different and surprising. So, if I had a little cup, I would say, here's to friends, a l'chaim, friend to friend, and maybe have many chaverim, but one at a time, and hopefully can help us get through difficult situations. The objectivity, the care, the trust that a friend has is an unbelievable resource, and it's something we should try to cultivate. And remember, it's all about being proactive. You can't just wait till someone comes to you. You have to initiate. And when you initiate, things come back to you. So, in that context, let me conclude and say this class is dedicated to a friend, by a friend. Our good friend Mark Malinsky. 2, the dedication is in honor of his uncle Yankel ben Menachem Mendel's yahrzeit, 14th of Sivan. Your parents' wedding anniversary, 15th of Sivan, and your father's birthday, Nachum Chaim ben Sarah Golda, 18th of Sivan. A lot of Sivans going on, so that's good. So Mark is dedicating the class, and tomorrow night, Philip always comes original look. Can I describe for the camera what you look like? Huh? Very good look, very good. A burgundy tie, is that it? Shoelace? Anyway, Philip is giving his class tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. If anyone interested, just contact him. He's sitting right here. You can speak to him. You don't even have to text him. But I told you, I was sitting near someone, and I couldn't get his attention until I texted him. And he said, why don't you tell me what, So I said, okay, yeah. So anyway, it's Philip, tomorrow 7 p.m. And we shall be here next Wednesday. I believe next Wednesday we return back to, on 5th Avenue between 19th and 20th. But we'll let you know in the emails. And yes, and I spoke today to Rabbi Metzger. I want to thank again Rabbi Metzger, Midtown, for hosting and allowing us the space. He told me on the phone this week he'll have air conditioning too. So I guess we did. And it's an honor, a pleasure to be your friend and to travel on this, co-travelers in this interesting journey called life. Thank you very much.